I think when you take a look at the history of the company, for me, like what the two things really stand out. I think that one, like the fact that its sale is being so lamented, particularly in the context of independent music, I think really describes where we are as far as like what it means to have an independent space for music and artists today. And to me, this also showcases that, like, sure, Bandcamp was like independent in that like it hasn't been owned by a bigger parent company, but like I wouldn't conflate it with the likes of, say, like your local record store, which is like sometimes how it's being described online. And also, like, the realist in me, maybe the cynic in me, like, let's not get it twisted. Like, no matter how cool Bandcamp is or was, like, the guys who founded this are Silicon Valley tech capitalists who have been running this company, and making profit and making the platform valuable has like always been a driving factor. But two, it seems to me to really reveal so much that the centers of power and how we like access art and culture now, like really rely on our reliance on Silicon Valley and like the larger tech sector, as it's called. And this is now the space by which we expect these types of so-called independent spaces to be launched or created or formed or like controlled. And then like, to me, that brings up a whole other array of issues and questions around like what it means to truly be independent and the sort of erosion of like locality. And also what you were saying earlier, it sets up this illusory like dichotomy that like, so often when we talked about Bandcamp, as I'm just explaining it even right here, it's like I'm being described as like this alternative to Spotify. Like, when an artist pulls their music from Spotify, it goes to Bandcamp or it remains there. But actually, like, Spotify and Bandcamp are on the same side of the coin in a lot of ways. Like, they're both tech startups looking to make a profit, and like one is vastly bigger than the other, but they have operated basically in the same space. And like, I can't say for sure, but like with this sale or partnership or whatever it is, it seems to be true that the goal has always been to scale up, grow, make a profit if possible, and ultimately make the value of your product attractive enough to a bigger company so that you can cash out, hopefully at your peak, before like, giving up future control of the product company to, a rapidly consolidating like tech industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot there, right? And I think we could probably spend an entire episode just trying to figure out like the role of Bandcamp and how the role of Bandcamp in the modern music like industry and imaginary and what that tells us about how folks in those in that industry are thinking about capitalism. I mean, I think just to pull out a couple of threads of what you just said. For one, I do think like it is important to think about like, what does it mean if your local record store is a single centralized internet platform? And like you said, the relationship to locality changes there and the relationship to space. And I don't think it's necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it is like it's a different thing, I mean, I could imagine, our friend of the pod, David Turner, and is always talking about kind of like the importance of libraries. Like you could imagine a set of local institutions in like a federated model that, like interlibrary loan for record stores, right? Or interlibrary loan for local labels. So it's a set of local institutions. But this is a centralized, and that, in many ways, is what the internet allows culture to do, right? It allows an increased fungibility, right? An increased interchangeability of a variety of cultural forms. It allows this kind of centralization. It allows the kind of effacing of space and the types of distance and difference, but also the types of community and interaction that were spatially organized for like most of human history. And so like I think it's like an open question. I mean, I also think that there's an important question here, and some I think of the gut level reaction to the sale of Bandcamp has been kind of what you said, right? Like I think that folks, and we're all thinking through relationships to capitalism and how and what is a good relationship to capitalism in the market and what is a bad one. And a lot of times there's this idea that like small and local is good and big is bad, and big and corporatized is bad. But like first off, like anyone who's been paying attention to the quote unquote like Great Resignation can easily see like a lot of small business owners are just as exploitative and manipulative as big corporations, just on a different scale. So it's not like,
ask anyone who's working in the service industry.
Like small does not equate with good. But also, there's a thing about like what I think some of this is like what level of profitability is seen as like just. And that's part of what's going on here, right? And if that's actually what's going on here, and things that Bandcamp treated folks fairly well and took what was conceived to be a reasonable cut, then the size of it doesn't actually matter or shouldn't matter as long as those policies exist. But there is at the same time this sense of that conglomeration is necessarily bad, that being part of a broader corporate infrastructure is necessarily bad. And that might be true, but then I think those two ideas need to be detached to a certain extent. And finally, I mean, I think that like kind of what you're saying about all of this is that like there is this, you know, a lot of people online were like, did we just lose our local independent record store? And it's like, we never had a local, like I never owned a record store. Those were always businesses, and businesses can exist in a community. Whoa. But certainly we never had Bandcamp. It was always a company that was going to do what companies do.